I may fancy myself one of the original catfishes on the internet back in the day because I had an AOL account far, far, far too early. And my favorite pastime was going into chat rooms and inappropriately talking to humans because I was fascinated about the bodily experiences that I was having whilst talking to a stranger person just via text, right? So I was pretty young. And eventually that led me on to my path of discovering the joyful art of intimacy on the internet, AKA porn. I was fascinated about everything that I saw. I come from a family that is a bit technologically advanced, and I didn't know that my father had installed spyware onto the cam or onto our computer. So little did I know, my dad knew exactly what his freak of a daughter was up to. But I also had a lot of fun because I got to click around and I got to see, hey, what's going on here? What's happening? Oh my God, bodies can do that. Holy cow, what is happening here? And one of the first sexualized experiences that I was turned on to was two girls and one guy. And this would be what one of my favorite things to watch would be because I just find, and I guess I have always found the feminine form so stunning. And just watching them interact and the way that they were touching each other was so different than how like the male and female porn was, you know? It didn't have as much heart. So I found it really interesting to include both bodies, both sexes happening in here and being like, oh my gosh, what is going on? And it definitely tantalized me in all the way. But I think for the most part, my first few times kind of exploring on different porn websites and seeing what was on offer there was purely out of curiosity because I was not being educated on sex. My parents sat me down and had some sort of mediocre conversation, but of course, like the language wasn't there then. Bless the boomers, but they've still got a lot of work to do. Uh, But what I found interesting was, like, I could see all different shapes and sizes and styles and the way that people were touching one another, and instead of just, like, diving in and figuring out what self-pleasuring was, I was far more interested in, like, the emotional connection that was going on. So I feel like a nerd, but I've always loved the storylines that are going on behind them, and thankfully, later on in life, I got to come across porn that was made by women, ethical porn, where the storylines were luscious and juicy and definitely turned me on more than just, "Oh, here's this person trying to sell a house, and this guy's looking at it, and then next thing you know, they're fucking." Like, there are many ways to, feel tantalized by the visual sides of things, but I was also realizing that it was less about visually what I was seeing and more about the sounds that I was hearing that were a really big turn on for me, which eventually led to me being interested in, sex parties down the line. But all of these things, lead to one thing after another. But I I think there is a lot of issues in the porn industry. And obviously, when I was like 13 or 14, I was not keen on any of that, or even aware that somebody might be having sex against their will or just doing it for a paycheck or heaven forbid faking everything. But I studied the hell out of everything that I watched, and I was like, okay, this is how you do it, this is how you inwardly connect, this is how you get to go and have fun. And for me, it seemed very performative, and it ended up being very performative, which goes back to my previous tender tale about faking pleasure for as long as I did. But I really did get to learn what it looked like from there, you know? Nobody was telling me that that wasn't real. So I just mimicked it because that's kind of what we do as humans. So for me, it was very informative into the realm of, oh, where can you go with this? How could this feel for you? And obviously, there are so many different styles of porn out there, also. And most of those things, like, we are never going to get to experience in our lives. I feel like I definitely threw myself to the wolves and put myself in many situations so I could try and sample everything. And I still like to do that. But visually, most of us are always going to take in more with our eyeballs than we are with our physical bodies. So I think it's just a fascinating endeavor to go down into and be like, oh, okay, wow, like this kind of porn exists, or people get pleasure from this kind of thing. But most importantly, figuring out what feels right for you. What are you tantalized by? So, for little young teenage version of me, she was interested in threesomes from the jump, which is funny because I don't enjoy threesomes in real life. So I wonder, is there anything that you visually like to take in that you wouldn't necessarily like to enjoy in like your day-to-day sex life? Get inquisitive. Are there things about your sex life that you might judge? When I was going through my sexuality training, I had to sit down and take a look and see if I had any judgments or biases towards different kinds of sex or bodies or people or whatever it might have been. And I'm a human. Of course, I had judgments, right? I'm a human who had an eating disorder for 10 years. So, of course, I'm going to judge the size of bodies in these, tantalizing porn videos. So, it was an interesting thing for me to kind of sit down and get reacclimated and understand, like, oh, where did these judgments come from? Are they serving me? Can I let go? And can I truly believe that everyone is deserving of the pleasure and joy that they're looking for, regardless of the size of their body or the color, the shapes, the sounds, the anything? I learned a lot of how to judge sex from porn, and then it took a lot to unlearn that also. I'm still turned on by that kind of fantasy, and I try to only prescribe to ethical porn because obviously that industry is really, really seedy and can get really gross. So just, check in on what you're viewing. How are you using it? Does it feel good for you? And most importantly, especially as you endeavor into, solo pleasure, if you are enjoying it alongside porn, remember to give yourself permission to make some noise. Okay. Welcome to my first endeavor into porn. I'm sure we'll go deeper in on this down the line, but I just thought it was so sweet and innocent. Also, something that I learned in my trainings was that most of us self pleasure or watch porn in the way that we did when we were first introduced to it. So if you are still like that, expand your experience. Give yourself permission to check out something that you might have not have been interested in back in the day, or change the position of your body as you're getting into solo pleasure if that is a part of your practice. Uh, but for me, I'm always like, oh, right, things can't always stay the same, right? I like to see like where can I push the boundaries? How can I feel more? How can I be more embodied? Where is there more pleasure in my body? And for me, I'm like, okay, this fantasy is definitely still one that I love, but it has changed over the years. And sometimes it works for me and sometimes it doesn't. So also giving yourself enough room to understand that you might not always love what you enjoyed in the past. What else can tantalize you? What else can bring you closer to that sense of orgasmic pleasure, or just pleasure within your body? Let yourself go and have some fun. I'll see you soon.